All right. Hello. Thank you so much for pressing play and for taking me with you wherever you are, whether you're getting steps in or whether we're in your car together, driving somewhere. I'm just so glad I'm along for the ride, getting my steps in with you. And we are talking about faith, purpose, and leadership, brought to you by the Cornerstone Coffee Break. And today, I am just so excited to introduce you to one of my longtime friends, a mentor of mine, and someone I love very much, Josh Beers. Woo! Josh, thank you so much for being here today.
Honored to be here with you, Garrett, and all of our listeners and friends as well.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, Josh Beers is a lifetime learner. He's a coach. He's a mentor to the next generation. And he's been a mentor to me. When did we meet? Was it 2006, I think?
You were raw, fresh out of college, ready to conquer the world, and filled my bucket then, and you've been filling it ever since.
Oh, man, likewise. It's a two-way bucket, two-way street, two-way bucket.
Uh,
Well, I'm not trying to make you have a big head or anything, but I really do look at you as one of the wisest people I know. And I say that because of your knowledge of scripture and how you try to live in alignment to the chief cornerstone. And I really do see you as someone who's built a life on the word. And I think that is what has made you so wise, according to my perspective and my interactions with you. I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings where it was where we used to work at the Bible college. A problem would come up or an issue would come up. And so many times I just remember watching you in real time just lean on biblical wisdom and leadership wisdom and just throw out some wild solution that just, blew my mind. And so I'm just so grateful for being able to be so close to you in leadership and in life and allowing God allowing me to be in proximity with you and seeing how you lead. It's been a true blessing.
Very kind words, Garrett. I will say this, many times in those meetings, I remember praying what the writer of the book of James, who was a brother of Jesus, said, "If you lack wisdom, ask God." And I remember
Yes.
quietly many times tapping that powerful resource that I don't know what to do. God, help us to know. And so so many times I think we have to come up with our human wisdom, and then we forget that the greatest best-selling book of all time is the Bible, chock full of not only what is the answer and purpose for life, but also gives us the wisdom and insights that are timeless.
Yeah.
That's why a lifelong study of the Word of God, as I refer to the Bible as, is so crucial for us as leaders who are navigating complex situations so often. So your words are kind, but I attribute all of that to the grace that I'm a recipient of regularly and the prayers I pray often for God, please give us wisdom. Not sure what to do here.
Yeah, and I am not exaggerating when I say that that's probably the most consistent prayer that I pray. Anytime I'm in a staff meeting, anytime I'm starting work, anytime that I'm doing anything work related or have an issue in front of me, it's just been so ingrained in me because of leaders like you and others into my life to ask for that promise
Yep. It's a
that God has for us in James, that we can ask anytime for wisdom and he will give liberally to us.
Yeah, it's
What a
an
great promise.
incredible promise that I think far too many do not take advantage of because it is a promise.
Well, I'm excited to explore all these different areas of faith, purpose, and leadership with you. And so, just to start, the first question here: has there been a significant way in the season of life you're in right now that you have grown in faith, purpose, or leadership?
God has been stretching my wife and I in significant ways. We all go through different life seasons. We have just entered into empty nest stage as parents. And so we
Mm,
now have four adult children. One is still in college, so she'll come home, but we see her a couple months out of the year instead of every day. In the midst of that, and if I could go back in time, I would not script it this way. We relocated about a year ago. Well, actually, this past August. So going to empty nest stage combined with relocating, starting all over in a job vocation that I have never previously done, but in a completely different community as well, has majorly stretched our faith, my wife and I together, and my own personal faith to really, again, can I depend on God? Is God really in this? Have I made a mistake? And you really get to discern and see, at least for me personally, how much I was living my life by sight. I was safe. And as I get older, the temptation is actually to want to become more comfortable and more safe. And yet that's not what the calling in my life is. And I believe what it means to be a follower of Christ means that we stretch in that faith, which allows us to fulfill the purpose and then to influence the people God wants us to. So it's been very significant, probably the hardest 9 to 12 months in the last 2 decades of my life is what we're living in right now, and it's incredibly stretching and also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. I resonate with that so much with leaving ministry at a church, at a large church with a really high level leadership position and a salary and health insurance,
Yep.
and then moving into missions. Probably the scariest decision I ever made. And like you said, as we get older, we want to be a little more comfortable and have a little more. We don't want to be taking these kind of risks, but
Yep.
it's by faith, right?
Yep. Now I wanna add this one thought if I can. Martin Luther King, I believe, is attributed as saying, it may not be original with him, "When you climb your last mountain, you begin to die." And I think
Mm,
that ties to faith.
mm,
If I'm there was an element of opportunities where it kind of not saying I could do it in my own strength, but there was an element of security and safety in it.
yeah,
And I don't think we're called, for me as a Christ follower, to maintain. In fact, I think the scriptures are clear on in the stories Jesus told about those who buried their talent in the ground versus those who went out and sought to multiply the gifting they had. And it was not just monetarily, but of what we've been entrusted with.
yeah.
I think faith plays an active part in that. There's way more that can be said about that, but I think an active
Mhm.
faith is a faith that is trusting for what we can't see,
Yeah.
rather than just getting into like, okay, I can explain where my next 5 years and what that's going to look like.
I was really wrestling with the concept of calling back in 2015. And something we'll talk about maybe later and more on this podcast is I want to write a book on calling, top calling. But one of the original frustrations I had was I was comfortable. I just bought a house on a double deeded lot with an in ground pool a block away from my parents. I was working at the church I grew up in. I didn't want to move, but I definitely felt God calling me to something else. And one of the things I learned in that season was we're not called to convenience.
That's right.
Yeah, we're called on mission. One thing I want to explore with you is one of my core beliefs is if you have a personal mission statement, if you are locked in at like why you're here and your purpose on this earth, you could do any job and still find ways to do it with meaning and purpose. So when I heard that you left a VP position at a college, working with students and student leaders, to now switching to do development, I was just was shocked that Josh Beers is doing a development role, but you, I'm assuming now, I don't know how many months it's been, or has it been a year even
Yeah,
since you've
little
been there?
little over a year, although I commuted
Okay.
for a big chunk of the first 6 months, but I'm about a year and a half in, so 18 months.
So talk a little bit about how your, your personal mission statement is coming being put into play into practice in this role of development.
It's interesting because you feel this tug, and so there's certain roles that people can have, development being one of them. I was in enrollment for a lot of years, and so you're measured. In other words, the world sees your scoreboard,
Mm,
because you can't hide. Did we raise money, not raise money? Did we get students or did we not get students? I'm a coach at heart. Did we win the game or not win the game?
yeah,
And part of the mission of my life, well, it's driven by a simple love for God and a love for others. But in those values, part of it is to make sure that I'm pursuing what matters most in life. And in that dynamic, I didn't want the development side, but I did say, if you want me to learn development, it comes with under the umbrella of who I am.
yeah.
So we've been in the relationship business of things, and in fact, I've met with a couple of people that I revere and are mentors to me in development, and I've kind of shared who God's wired me to be, and they're like, "Well, Josh, that's what development's all about."
Hmm.
the dynamic of, if you see the development guy coming and you go the other way, that's not development. They should move towards. I think 3 of the last 4 gifts we received that are very significant for the school where I work, I didn't make an ask. I just simply was probing at what the mission of that particular person's life was, and as they shared with me their mission, we found synergy in that, and
Mhm.
then they came back and said, "Hey, can I be part of what is taking place at Faith Christian Academy?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna stand in the way of that," but it's simply aligned. And I think that part of my life journey and my mission to reach the next generation and that passion in my heart being carried through in development is not a script I would have written 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I've also been have an incredible boss who has shaped my job around how I'm wired. So I'm spending a way more time than a typical development person would spend with students because he understands that that is a driving passion of mine and is part of the mission of why I'm even in this role is I want to plant trees that I'll never sit in the shade of. And to me, that's
Wow.
what ministering to the next generation is. We're going to invest in young people. And for me, as much as I love college work, felt the burden that we weren't reaching them soon enough.
Hmm.
I didn't think I was gonna go back into working in the K through 12 world, but I definitely experiencing firsthand now the joy that comes from chasing the hearts of children and youth.
I think there's a great leadership lesson there with delegation and empowerment because a part of our job as leaders is to empower other people to be leaders. We're not trying to create more followers, we're trying to
Right.
create more leaders. But what that looks like a lot of times is I want you to do this job and I want you to do it exactly how I would do it.
Yes,
Well, that's not empowerment.
100%.
That's trying to make a clone of yourself. And what I hear you saying is, here's my character. Here's my passion. Here's the results you want to get. And I can do that for you. I can run after that and work for it. I'm not going to work as a typical development person.
Yes, and that speaks to the leadership of my boss, Ryan, who has empowered, not microed, and it takes I think there's something to be said again about leadership when we as leaders understand that we're more concerned about the mission. I think Colin said it so well in the Good to Great. Level 5 leaders care more about the organization than about themselves. And when you surround yourself with leaders that are stronger than you are or bring something to the table, that's the kind of leader I want to follow. That's the kind of leader I want to be.
Mhm.
And that dynamic is what true empowerment looks like. And I fear there's a lot of people who see leadership through a lens that has nothing to do with what true influence and leadership really is. And so to experience that, to be able to, again, here I am, Garrett, 54 years old, showing up every day and loving what I get to do because I'm pouring into the next generation. And I get to meet with people in their 70s and I get to meet with people in their 20s. And then I get to rub shoulders with kids and youth and tell them, God's got an amazing purpose and plan for your life. To be part of all that is like, I'd say I don't want to ever wake up and actually go to work because for 30 plus years now, I've gotten to just invest and it's a joy to get up every day and go into my job, quote unquote. When in reality, all I'm doing is living out the calling God has for my life. That's why I'm excited about your book, Top Calling. I think that collision
Mm.
and when it happens and we connect it to a genuine purpose. I know my purpose, but I have a leader who didn't try to change that purpose, instead adapted a title or a position to fit that purpose. And by God's grace, we're thriving.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to touch on something you just said in passing, kind of quick, but it was a quote I heard at a leadership conference a couple years ago, and I can't remember the author of the quote, but you mentioned a large part of it of I want to plant trees that I'll never get to sit under the shade of, or something like
Yes.
that.
Yep.
And I just think that's such a beautiful picture of true leadership, where we're not pursuing fame, we're not pursuing, a paycheck, or we're actually looking for impact that's going to outlive us
That's right.
and to make a difference in the world that other people will benefit long after we're gone.
Yeah. And I believe we were created for that kind of purpose. The challenge is I believe the enemy wants us to say, no, it's all about us.
Mm,
And when I get to if I could share some of the people that I've crossed paths with in the last 18 months who the way they are generously living their life with an abundance mentality when they could be thinking about themselves in their final decade or so of life
Mm,
has been so inspirational because they're modeling that, and then they're coming alongside our school and doing it again. And they know, like, humanly, unless they live longer than Abraham, they will not ever sit in the shade of even slightly. And that beautiful picture reflects what I believe is closest to the heart of God, and that's we live so that we can give. For God so loved that he gave, and that giving comes of who I am and of the brief life I've been given on this earth, and then of whatever God entrusts me to steward well for his purposes.
yeah. A biblical principle, but also a really beautiful leadership principle is captured in a book that I know we've both read of The Infinite Game
Yes.
by Simon Sinek. That is such a true kingdom principle
Yeah,
of working for today so that the game won't end.
that's
That we
exactly
keep
right.
inviting new players and we
Yeah,
keep changing the rules but the mission stays the same.
yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful principle both biblically and in leadership. And then you touched on something about giving, like God is a giver and we want to live our lives as givers. And if I would ask you, underneath the current, there's a current that flows underneath of our leadership, of our work day to day, and that is our core beliefs. And one of the core beliefs that I remember you talking about from our time at Lancaster Bible College was I can never outgive God.
Yes.
And I remember you sharing stories here and there of times where you really didn't have much, but you still gave and you saw God be faithful. And do you want to lean into that a little bit and talk about what was the inspiration or the prompt for you to really embrace that as a core belief?
Yes, my dad gets a lot of credit for that. I was literally just sharing this with someone the other day of I had my first job when I was 10 years old and I made $10, which was a big deal for me because if you knew how long ago I was 10 years old, it's a long time. And he said to me, "Son, the first thing we do is we give a dollar to God," which, and the Old Testament teaches the tithe. I think the New Testament gives to that idea of offering and being generous and giving from our hearts. But I remember doing that and watching, then he invested a lot of it and told me, another "You're gonna put this in the bank," and, basically told me he was gonna try to match that, which was telling me why it was such a good investment, but he was driving home in my life giving. "Son, give and save before you spend," and the giving part that you referenced, I think that's where it started, when I was giving $1. There were no zeros behind that $1. But I believe it's a heart of giving. There's a little story that Jesus tells in the accounts of his life where he watched people throw in money, and it was a widow who threw in a couple pennies, and he said, "She's given more than everybody."
Hmm.
And that heartbeat, I think, flows from what we give of our time, of our talents, and if I'm staying with T's, the treasure of what we have. But that's where it started, and I experienced it firsthand in a really neat gift. If I can just tell this story real fast, I was in my early 30s, and someone gave us $500, which at that time as a youth pastor was a whole lot of money to me. But
Yes.
there was some of my youth staff who were volunteering who had real needs. And I remember going to my wife and saying, "I really think that we should share this with them." And so I went to the person who gave. I said, "Hey, I think there's some other people. And do you mind if we bless them, which means you would be blessing them?" He said, "Absolutely. Go ahead, Josh." And so we gave away 300 of that $500.
Mm,
No big deal. 2 Sundays later, I think this is all like a God story that drove it home to me. They walk in Monday morning, I'm in the office, and someone walks in, hands me an envelope, says, "Hey, this was in the offering plate that got passed at our church, but it had your name on it." And so I said, "Thanks." I put it down. She goes, "No, I need you to open this." I opened it up. There was I've not ever touched this kind of money again in a cash form. There was 30 $100 bills.
wow.
Well, here's what hit me. It was like a God moment because the first thought, Garrett, this is how sinful I am. I thought to myself, why didn't I give 500? I would have got $5,000. I got $3,000. I gave away $300, and 2 weeks later, I'm being handed $3,000, which we
Wow.
were in desperate need of because our car needed fixing and we didn't have money for it. It was a incredible generous I was on the receiving end of incredible generosity,
Yeah.
but it transformed my thinking to say, "Wait a second, quit stressing, live open-handed, live generously." And so that moment in my life, I look back on often. And then as God trusts more to us, how do I steward that? And one of the ways I steward that is by giving it away. So I'm reminded that everything I have has been given to me. 1 Corinthians 4:7, it's been God's given us everything. So why would I boast as if I haven't received it? Whether it's my
Mm,
any of those areas of my life. And so that passion for me to give, and that's why I don't really worry about raising money for my particular organization. I just want to see a generation of givers. God will direct the right ones to our work. But
yeah.
how do we simply cultivate in people? God loves a cheerful giver.
Mm,
So I don't need to cajole people or guilt them into saying you need to give. Hey, God loves when you give cheerfully, whether you give to us or somewhere else. But man, do you want the smile of God on you today? Give and live cheerfully.
yeah.
So
And I love to be cheerfully given too.
and you know what? When that happens, then we can receive it with gratitude, knowing that it's
Yeah.
from the giver of all good things. I think that's
Yes.
the part we've lost sight of because sometimes my pride has kept me from receiving well.
Mm,
When others want to bless my life or my family's lives. And I could s we could spend all day talking about how we've received so much, and, to have the joy of watching people enjoy giving is something I'm really enjoying in this season of my life.
yeah. You are a link in a chain of people who have imprinted on my life that being generous and being giving is a worthy core value.
Well said. Mm, thank you.
And
Yeah.
and I am just so grateful, and I kinda said it tongue in cheek, I like to be cheerfully given to, but since going into missions, part of my less laboratory of learning has been able to receive. Getting halfway through a month and having a ton of stuff break and not having funds, and then a random person calling me and saying they need to meet up. And then I meet up with them and they hand me an envelope full of $100 bills, like you said. And it's like, wow, like God is the giver and knows all of our needs. I think there's a both and there about making your needs known, but also trusting God that He knows and He's going to provide.
I listened to a podcast, it was not nearly as good as yours, but it was a decent one, and they were talking about George Mueller, and, you'd hear these stories of how he would pray, and then they would go to the door, and there was, a meal or whatever, and then somebody said, if you look back, he made over 2,500 asks in his life.
Mm,
Like, he didn't just pray, he prayed and then invited people to partner in the work that he was doing, and I think there's something powerful about connecting, and inviting people to be part of something bigger than themselves, which I think is ultimately, as we talk about purpose, the purpose in life we have is to connect our story to the story. And I think
yeah.
people that grasp that actually understand what true living by faith, fulfilling our purpose, and really influencing others is all about when we realize that we play a part in the story, rather than simply making the story about ourselves, which actually makes us smaller.
Yeah, let's press into purpose a little bit. That's a really big focus of mine, and again, you're someone who is very intentional, a very purposeful person, and you are someone who's in a new role, doing a job that probably wasn't on your resume before, but you are allowing your purpose to come alive in this role. So, to give us a little snapshot about, how you view your purpose, your connection to the larger story, and maybe a little bit of the steps along the way that helped you embrace that.
One of the things that's really interesting because we always are standing on people's shoulders. So we kind of we're in this journey and people listening to this, some people are like, I don't have a clue what my purpose is. And other people are, you know what, I've known this and that. I was in my late 20s, early 30s when I began. So really close to when our journeys were connecting, where I began to realize I used to think of my purpose as a location or a vocation. And it's just not that. I began to, when I focused less on what I was going to do as a career and more about embracing who God had created me to be.
Mm,
And then God used some key influences in my life to really help me discover my unique gifts and how to leverage those gifts to impact people's lives. And for example, God's wired me as an encourager. And sometimes people will say to me, you know what, you've encouraged me, or you've really, put wind in my sails. And I'm like, if I don't, I'm simply wasting what God has entrusted to me. Just like I look at some people that do some other things and I'm like, how do they do that? And then I come to grips with, wow, they have that unique ability and that's part of God's purpose for their life. And so for me, a lot of it was God used some amazing people in my life, starting with my dad, who really helped me discover how I was wired. And then how do I want to use my gifts, not to make money, to make an impact. And the money will take care of itself, but really discovering that purpose of what I love to do, combined with what God has gifted me to do for me, then combined with what's going to make a difference long after I'm gone. Colliding those things together gets me really close to the core of what my purpose is.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is a lot of your purpose flows from identity.
Yes.
And
Who I am. Yep.
we're all made in the image of God. We all are have unique aspects that dominate other personality traits, and we all lean towards,
Yep.
and so what you've identified about your identity is that you are generous, you are a giver, you are an encourager. And so your purpose is flowing out of who I am, who God created me to be.
Yep. Which well said, Garrett. And that means some things I'm never going to be called to do, including in my talents. Like there's certain things you put me behind a desk in front of a spreadsheet all day and I'm going to be miserable. But part of it's because that's not who God wired me to be.
Mm,
And then there's other people who are just geniuses in that kind of role, and they become the foundation of helping organizations to thrive. And I think that's I love in this world helping people to discover because I think so often we get into comparison mode rather into discovery mode. And the more we can live in saying, let's help you discover there's only one of you on the face of this earth. Let's figure out how to help you discover who you were created to be.
mm,
And then your purpose in life will flow out of that freely, with its challenges, but with joy because your doing is flowing out of your being.
I love that. And that person who has that spreadsheet in front of them, that's their playground.
Oh.
There's people out there that they love that.
And God bless them. We need them desperately, and I'm so thankful. I really am. It's amazing to realize we can't do like, that's again why I go back to the Bible for all these leadership principles and truths. The Bible talks about that, like the different parts of the body. We
Yeah.
all need each other. All we need to do is sprain a toe and realize how valuable each toe is. And sometimes we want to give, well, you're not this, so therefore you're not important, when the opposite is true. And
Mhm.
and that's where I think comparison is a killer right now of people discovering their purpose. We're
Yeah,
trying
wow.
to live up to other people's expectations. We're trying to live up to what someone else appears to be instead of being the authentic you that you were created to be.
Yeah. Now have you boiled down your purpose and your mission into a statement or a sentence, something that you remind yourself of, or
This is gonna be so basic, Garrett, but like, you're gonna write a book. Someone said to me the other day, I should write a book, and my response was, the forward will be longer than my book, and by page 3, you'll just be coloring pictures because I'm really, really simple. But here it is. My purpose in life is to love God and love every person God brings into my life today.
Yeah.
And it really has freed me up. So when that appointment that I'm not as looking forward to, I can't shake that purpose in my life to love every person God brings into my life today. And in order to love God, right, I need to love the people that He's brought into my life. And so it's been freeing because it's simple. I
Mhm.
don't have to overthink things.
Yeah.
Who are the appointments? I have a lot of them scheduled today, and there may be some that I didn't schedule in. But that purpose, you wake up and do that every day or attempt to by God's grace. And then all of a sudden you look back on when I start talking about my life in decades instead of in years. And
Yeah.
then a Garrett Lowe reappears in my life and says, hey, thank you for this. All I was trying to do was love a raw, albeit extremely talented young man, fresh out of college, ready to conquer the world, who I was so impressed with, who also I thought had a lot to learn.
Who is
But
this person?
instead of trying to fix you, my job was to love you. And that meant sometimes we had some conversations, but your teachability made it a joy. But I wasn't trying to it wasn't complicated for me. And I just think it's a lot harder to love every person God brings into our life than I care to admit. But when I can stay anchored in that purpose, a lot of leadership development and empowerment and all these other things we're talking about flows out of that. But to me, that's a byproduct of living out who I'm supposed to be in my purpose and how I've been created.
Mm, I love that. I think if I could compare, our individual mission, which you said it's right out of scripture, love God, love people. I think churches have the same mission, which is
Yeah.
go and make disciples of all
Yep.
nations, teach them to obey everything I've taught you. But churches come up with their own little sayings of how they do it.
Yep.
And I think as a believer, every Christian, every follower of Jesus should have the same mission that falls under that umbrella of love God, love people. If I was crafting your personal mission statement, and I'm doing an episode on this probably in the next week or two, and I'm
Yep.
really thinking through helping people craft their own mission statement.
Excellent.
But the way that you love God and the way that you love people is through things like encouraging
That's right.
and generosity and dropping truth bombs. I mean,
Yep.
offering course correction and wisdom. So even though you think it's simple and general, love God, love people, you have a whole toolbox of things that I've seen you use over the years that has made your purpose and mission still unique, even though it falls under that umbrella of loving God and loving people.
Garrett, if I can say this, this is really neat, and this is no credit to me. God gets all the glory. Um, but one of my former students from 20 years ago texted me yesterday, and I get to hear from, been coaching for 30 plus years. The joy for me is you coach for two scoreboards, the one everyone sees that increase your platform to coach for the one that no one sees. And that's where these young men are going to, or young ladies are going to be 10, 15 years from now after you've coached them. But yesterday I got a text from one of my players, and he said, "Hey, coach, just want you to know 50 days sober and counting." And
Mm,
I just wrote him back, said, "So proud." He said, "Staying consistent in the word too." And talked about a couple other things, have a plan to be out of debt in the next 4 years. I said, "Keep living the identity God has given you." So thrilled to hear all of this. He's out in the Midwest right now. He said, "Started going to church again too," and talked about some other things. I said, "Keep doing it. God has great things ahead for you. You can see where living out my purpose in this is."
yeah.
And then he said, "I'm thankful your consistency and how you've remained a rock for me. I've
Mm,
struggled a lot since my divorce. I want you to know, thank you for never stop believing in me and loving me and what I can be." And that's the piece that you say, like, that's living out your purpose. He was not scheduled for my day yesterday.
yeah.
No credit to me. All glory to God and but somebody helped me to identify that's who I am. There's people listening to this who there's little moments of just figuring that out, but it's how we live it out. If the church all lived out the mandate to go out and make disciples, we'd transform the world. The reality is many of us have slipped into our own agendas. And it can happen, same thing to me. I can say, "Yeah, my catchphrase, love God, love others." Okay, what about that person over there that you really didn't feel like being interrupted by? What about and so that's it's the fleshing out of it, and I think you helping people with their mission statement, Garrett, and then to quote my dad who would challenge me all the time, he would say, "Son, are you living it?" So
Mm,
don't who cares if you have a purpose statement? Are you living that purpose statement is the real question.
yeah. I, um I know that, something your dad has said to you and that you've shared with me and others on your team has been, how did you leave your comfort zone?
Yeah.
So when thinking about opportunities to live out your purpose, I know that was a really big question to confront ourselves with is how am I and maybe not even leaving your comfort zone, but I love the idea of expanding your comfort zone. But
Well,
growth doesn't typically happen inside that.
that's right. And we will not ever live out what a faith-filled life looks like if we don't expand our comfort zone. If I
Mm,
can explain everything, if I can control everything, that's a really small life.
yeah.
My dad's wisdom say, "How did I leave my comfort zone this week?" As he was constantly reminding me that there was a great big world out there, and I had a whole lot to learn, which I'm grasping much more at 54 than I did at 24.
Mhm.
But the reality is that lifelong learner, which is one of my core values, has been shaped out of that ability then to say, I love sitting with people who have a different view on life than I do. My favorite people to sit with sometimes to talk with in a cordial conversation is people who have different views on politics or on the church or on the roles of things or on leadership because I get to be a student, and that's really fun to keep learning.
Yeah, I love that. Well, there's 2 really core ideas that I love to explore with people, and that is the areas of life, lead yourself first, and lit, lead your team.
Mm.
And I know that you do both really well, and I just wanna ask you to maybe share a little bit about what are some ways that you lead yourself first?
You know, Garrett, your timing on asking that question, one of the dangers for us as leaders, especially as our influence grows, is we begin to give lip service to leading ourselves first. And I'll say this, my family knows this. I got into a little rut in my life over the last couple years where I was leading myself in my spare time, and that's not good leadership of yourself.
Mm,
And made some commitments before the Lord heading into this year that I was going to be very, very intentional about leading myself. So the commitment that I made in my life to lead myself was to say, I'm going to start with God before I touch my phone or anything else. I'm saying that in part just to be the candor of how easy it is to drift into I'm already in work mode or whatever else it is. I got to solve the world's problems as if it relies on me. And so hitting the reset button with God every morning. I just had this morning again, just an enjoyable time with God, being stretched in my walk with Him and who He is, um, taking time to slow down. And in that process, what I have found is the wisdom of God and the wisdom to handle life situations, whether someone has a faith journey or not, is enhanced by that ability to say, am I doing this before I start asking other people to do it? There's countless times in my leadership where I believe God has graciously shown me where I was not leading myself well. I've been speaking in chapel and in schools and other places where like, I literally have pulled out my pen subtly and just put a little check by it because God convicted me about something while I was telling people how to live. I
yeah.
think a few times I would tell people, but most of 'em are like, "Oh my word, that was for me. I'm not leading myself well."
Mm,
And, we get to the end of every single day, we pillow our heads, it's me and God, and I can't fool either one. But I live my identity as a saint. And because I'm a saint, because I have my faith in Christ for my salvation, I get to live an identity that I don't deserve. And therefore, my response of obedience and love flows out of that to lead myself. And I could go all sorts of ways, but for me, particularly leading myself, the danger I feel most is that I start to fake it. And I
yeah.
think being authentic to say, how am I really leading myself? I talk about
Mhm.
self discipline and then I snack ridiculous times and I say I'll start tomorrow, and that's why
Yeah,
books like Atomic Habits by James Clear and things like that have been so good in my life to say, "Is that discipline there?" And I've got a long way to go. I'm a work in progress.
yeah.
Um, but I don't think we can talk about that enough if we're really talking about leading. If we're gonna ever lead others, the hardest person to lead is certainly ourselves.
Yeah, and it's easy to drift.
Yes.
We get in routines and healthy habits that are so good that serve us, and then something changes at work, something changes in the home, something changes financially, and we go put out a fire, and then we come back the next day and forget to do our thing, and then before you know it, 6 months have gone by, 10 pounds overweight, and, haven't touched a leadership book and haven't
That's right.
dusted my Bible off.
Yep.
So it's easy to drift, we gotta fight
Yep.
for it.
Yep, we gotta fight for it, and that's why, when, commitment I made to read approximately a chapter a day out of a book, and all of a sudden you start reading, okay, and then, oh, we drifted from it, like you said, next thing you know, it's like I tend to justify instead of taking ownership,
Mm,
and that's why I think we also need accountability about leading ourselves. Who can I really talk to and say, "How are you really doing?" And I've invited a couple people into my life that have been doing that I want to tell the truth to. And sometimes when I'm not leading myself well, I know they're going to be asking me tough questions, and I'm thankful for that.
yeah. All right, so lead your team. I've been on your team, not a sports team. I haven't gotten the sports coaching from Josh Beers, but I have been on your team. And do you have one or two? And I have one that I want to share. But do you have one or two ways that you significantly lead your teams?
I think, especially as I lead, I have a deep passion for leading young leaders. And I am a huge fan of this generation. And I think they've gotten a lot of bad raps on some things. And so, but I think one of the things is deep down, they want to be led, but they want to be empowered. And so discerning what our team needs. And for me, one of my values, core values, is be a lifelong learner. And so I've tried in all of my different seasons of leadership and what I was doing, how do I lead people well? Well, I've got to be growing myself. A stagnant leader is not worth following. And so in my life journey, when I've been challenging people, what does it look like to lead yourself well? I mean, to lead your teams well, it comes from where am I learning and growing, and how do I impart that to them? And so I would send out for years at LVC a weekly email. I had a lead. We would do some. I did a student group where I was doing lead now. I had a leadership group that we meet monthly from what I was reading and studying, partly because I wanted to say, if we're not learning, how can we expect students we're pouring into to learn? And again, all of that flows out of my core value of being a lifelong learner. If I'm not growing and learning, what do I have to share with others? I'm just, sending the same truth out. Oh, I learned that a few years ago. Next thing you know, I've drifted, but somehow I want to live a life worth following. I don't know how those two things can align. And so part of the idea of sending things out for me, Garrett, was what am I learning this week? And so now I do it with my adult children. I'll send something out each Monday and just a little leadership nugget, something that I've come across. But on tomorrow, I'll start thinking about next week. So it can't be just, and every once in a while you regurgitate things you've heard or seen before, or it's really good and you're reminded of it. But in order to lead my team well, I have to truly be leading myself and growing. And I love the fact that you have not separated those two. Um, so crucial that we connect those two dots of leading myself. And then that naturally flows into leading my team or my tribe.
Yeah. You and one other mentor are the two reasons why I have embraced the core value of lifelong learning, and have made that a part of my own personal mission statement. So I just want to thank you for that, and thank you for living it out well. Now, from my perspective, if I was going to share a way that Josh Beers leads your team well, you have a little saying or quote or maxim, axiom, or leadership. You have like a principle for everything.
Yes.
So
Simple and short
when
usually.
when you said that if you would write a book, the foreword would be longer than the book, it's because I think you could put a whole book together of just Josh Beers sayings.
Oh,
And I remember several of them, but ones that sticks out that I've really tried to apply to my own leadership is winners find solutions.
yes.
How's it go? Winners find
Losers make
solutions,
excuses. Yep.
losers make excuses.
You
Yeah.
got it.
So
Yeah.
that's been a powerful one, but I just remember so many times in meetings or just one-on-one in your office, presenting an issue, telling you a long story about blah, 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 and then you just totally give me the answer with one sentence of a leadership principle. And I would love to read that book, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I'm maybe you can put a little addendum onto your book, and I'll throw 5 or 10 pages in, and we'll make it work together with top calling. I do think, to your point there, and if I could go back and lead you again, Garrett, I probably would have asked you a couple more questions and then dropped those what I would say truth bombs, these principles that, you know, losers make excuses people think is harsh. Well, no, it actually isn't, because I can lose on a scoreboard in coaching, or I could lose out on a job. If I learn from it and not make excuses, I'm actually a winner, because winners find solutions. And that dynamic solves buckets of problems that people are dealing with. And I'm amazed how much when I challenge people with that statement, since you use that one, they'll defend it and they'll start making excuses for it. I'm like,
And then
But
in your
but
mind, you're just kinda like
exactly, you're putting that up there, but that's the dynamic of leading teams is what do you need? And part of leading your teams, I think, because you triggered that because you were a hungry, growing leader. You've gotta meet people where they are if you're gonna lead teams well. One of the things that I think was masterful about the team that Jesus led, the people that his inner circle, the 12, they were such a eclectic group of people, but he met each one of them in what we read about the stories where they were. And then he helped them grow together to where they needed to go together. And really, the book of Acts is filled with stories of just how a couple of them turned the world upside down. That's what leading a team really looks like is can I influence them in such a way that they spread their wings and go higher and further than I could ever go? To me, that's the great joy of leadership, whether it's a coaching tree, whether it's a parent to a child, whether it's a boss to his employees, whatever that looks like. To me, it goes back to that idea of I'm in a posture of humility and service to you, and it is my great joy to see you go higher and further.
Mm.
That comes out of authentic leadership.
Have you ever had someone on your team that really struggled with being a solutions-driven person, where you had to maybe coach them or help them not just come to your office and drop the problem on your desk, but really empower them and helping them become someone who finds solutions?
So, two things came to mind with that excellent question. One was the person who lacks confidence, and what a joy to instill in them that belief in them and then see them lean in and go from excuses to solutions and to be willing to risk and to be willing to take that step of faith and be willing to challenge the status quo. That type is a blast
Mm.
because often when you see them come back later on, there's nothing to me more gratifying than seeing the light bulbs go on and this works and I can't believe and see where that growth is. It's amazing.
You opened up a new box in their life.
Exactly.
Like,
A
you lent them the confidence they didn't know they had, and all of
Yep.
a sudden, it's like, boom, they're a different person.
And there's the key influences in my life did that.
Mm.
I mean, the human instruments besides my father were men by the name of Jim Phillips and Randy Hurst and Robert Jordan, who the world probably doesn't recognize, but they saw in me what I didn't see in myself. I would have been that person, and I was that person, I should say. And
Yeah.
they saw in me what I didn't see in myself.
Mm.
And they're the human instruments responsible for the trajectory of my life and
Yeah.
the influence of my life. And so on the other side of that, though, the harder part is when someone doesn't see it. You get to a point where I need to release you in such a way that maybe God could use somebody else in their life to help them see what, for whatever reason. And there's, for me, part of it is a little bit of my I wanna call it determination, but it's really pride for me at sometimes that, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna get them to see it." Well, maybe I'm not, and maybe instead of pushing them beyond where they're ready, allow them to have maybe somebody else can speak a truth from maybe a different lens or a different perspective, and to hold that loosely that I don't change lives. And so if somebody's, making excuses and blame shifting and doesn't wanna live in solutions, instead of me fighting and fighting, fighting, at some point say, "Hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not the right person to lead you." And that could be a job transition, that could be a coaching whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But maybe trying to connect someone else who might connect that dot for me in a way that maybe I'm missing the mark with, instead
Mhm.
of putting that weight of responsibility on me. But I probably didn't let go in my earlier years as much. And now as I get older and realize I have less energy and less time,
Yeah.
I want to spend it with people who are hungry to keep growing and learning. And certainly, I'm just one of many. So the pressure's not on me. So if they're not looking for it, maybe they need to find someone that they do wanna grow from and to rejoice if they get it and not I think it's easy to stereotype people really quickly, and I'm sure glad that people don't hold me to the stereotype of what would have been said at me at varying seasons of my life. We're all works in progress, and in my faith journey, we're all in the sanctification process.
Yeah. I would agree with, the author and speaker John Gordon, who says, "One of the most important jobs as a leader is to create culture."
Yes.
And I think the way that you lead with this idea of empowering people to be, solutions driven and focused, is creating culture. And when someone who doesn't have that culture and doesn't want to be a part of it butts up against it, they either self-select out and they pick something else, or you have to help them find their exit. And I am reminded back to a conversation where, if I came to your office with problems, with an issue, one of your first things is, well, what's one or two solutions that you thought of? And it kind of forced me to really think about, oh, here's an issue I got to tell Josh about. It's really important. Oh, but before I do that, I better think about one or two possible solutions that I would handle it. And the reality was, we might have never even used my solutions. Maybe they were the wrong ones, but at least I was putting effort in, and you were training me and others around you that when we come to your office with an issue, we're going to collaborate. I'm part of the solution. I'm invited to be a decision maker versus the other mindset, which says, that's not my job.
Yes.
That's not,
Yep.
I don't, that's not why I get paid. That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like, we're a different culture.
Yep. And that is so true. And Maxwell was the one who said problems are something we can do something about. If we can't change it, it's not a problem. It's a fact of
Fact
life.
of life. That's
And
another
then
Josh Beers
And then every
Maxwell quote.
problem yeah, every problem has a solution. So if I can do something about it we spend an inordinate amount of time complaining about facts of life and not nearly enough time working on problems which have at least a proposed solution.
Hmm.
And in those proposed solutions, if I'm a humble leader, it could be that you're closer to the action than me. Why wouldn't I want you to come up with the best solution? But oftentimes we push problems up when in reality we should push them down to the lowest possible level because those are the people that are living in the problem and hopefully the solution. They might need a little coaching, but we should solve problems at the lowest level possible, not at the highest level possible. And I think a lot of leadership models have really gotten that wrong. We push it up instead of saying, let's push that down. And then I'm gonna support you unless it's a major you could do something wrong. Why not support you? Because out of that, you're gonna learn, you're gonna grow, which also means you're gonna solve more things before they ever need to be pushed up, which means we can advance whatever mission we're working on together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I forget where I heard this. I think it was at a leadership conference about the idea of this generation doesn't want to be on an org chart, down they want to be part of a tree.
Yeah.
They want to be a branch connected to a strong trunk that has resources and nutrients, and they want to flourish as a branch out from us. So, like, I think that's a beautiful picture of new leadership structure and creating a real culture of people who are going out and doing good work, finding solutions, making a difference, and being empowered to do that with guidance,
Yes.
with
And
resources.
that's what I would say to the younger leaders. Stay hungry and teachable, but bring your ideas to the table. But I think that was the dynamic for me as a young leader. Someone said to me, "Josh, you're gonna be a great leader someday." Uh, you're 27 years old, you're being told, I'm like, what do you I need experience." Well, I'm gonna wake up at 30 and automatically be a good leader. And they didn't intend to discourage me, but it was almost like, "No, you're not ready yet." When in reality, I remember telling my wife, "And if God ever gives me an opportunity to lead young leaders, I'm not gonna tell them they gotta wait 10 years. I'm gonna
Mm.
jump in and we're gonna make mistakes and grow together because 'cause I'm still making mistakes in my 50s. So when do you ever get there?" And that dynamic of that, I believe we're poised if we're those who are leading the next generation that's coming up, we're poised to send out an incredible group of influencers by not limiting that. And then on the other side of it, I keep saying to them, but be teachable, ask good questions, because it can prevent you from making some of the mistakes I did make in my 20s, but they're ready to lead now. I'm convinced that high school kids, I'm the stuff that our students are doing right now, they've launched a coffee shop that they've turned into something. Now they've come with a nonprofit that they're launching out, that they're doing incredible things. These are 16 and 17-year-olds doing things that I wasn't even remotely on my mind in my teenage or even in my college years, the way they're saying, let's change the world. So we as adults and leaders who maybe have a few more years under our belt need to come alongside that and empower and infuse that with energy and perhaps some wisdom, but not squelch it. Instead, ignite it.
I love that. And I introduced you at the beginning of this episode by my relationship with you, but we didn't share where you work. We shared you're in development, but we didn't share where. Would you just want to give a quick intro to where you're working now with the
Sure.
students?
Yeah. So I'm at Faith Christian Academy in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. It's a school of about 1,000 students, an amazing setting that we are in to really effectively mentor and train up students. My role is development, but they've got me in a bunch of things we have a very strong athletic program, which for me, as you know, my passion for athletics is how do we use that platform. And so I'm involved in some of that and shaping some philosophy and shaping some leadership through that and the other co-curriculars I'm passionate about. And then development is my title. And so there's a component of friend raising and fundraising that I get to be part of to connect friends with the mission we have, and which is really to mentor and educate and train up the next generation.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for sharing, and thanks so much for making time to talk with me and to talk with everyone listening, and just sharing some of your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
I love it. It's always a joy to be with you, Garrett. And to quote my good friend, Dr. Tim Elmore, he would say, whatever you heard today, you eat the fish, you spit out the bones.
Yeah. I have one final question for you, though. Do you have any favorite leadership tool? I know we talked a lot about leadership tools, but any other leadership tools or books or resources that you would recommend people embrace or check out?
Couple books that have really shaped me on a spiritual level, and that's a core to who I am on the faith and purpose and leadership level. Living Life Backwards is by David Gibson is a study in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's really shaped my journey, and a book by John Ortberg called Soul Keeping that really, again, worked on from the inside out of who I am and leading myself. Leading with a Limp was a great outward facing book by Dan Allender that just allowing me to lead out of who I am. And then a book in dealing with people, Adversaries into Allies by Bob Burg. It's been around a while, but wow, did that shape how I deal with people. So we could name dozens of books, but those 3 or 4 what come to mind immediately on particularly in this season of life, Garrett, where I'm less about what I do and more about who I am. I encourage people to read and take on leadership tools that grow their unique wiring. I'll shamelessly put a plug in because you know this is true. I've been telling you to write this book ever since you kind of gave me the framework of it. That's 7, 8, 10 years ago.
That's
That book
embarrassing.
is so needed. It is so needed
Uh,
because it gets at the core of how where our leadership comes from and where our purpose and where our faith collide. But these books have helped me because as I get older, it's more and more out of who I am than all the things I do or the accomplishments that people tag to my name.
I love that. I'll put all of those book titles and authors in the show notes so people
Thank you.
can find them. They don't have to pause the recording or anything. So I'll put those in the show notes. And I do want to say, during our time working together, I'm 99% sure this is accurate. Every time you recommended a book, I've read it.
Wow.
And so these are 4 new books that I need to add to my list that you've recommended me read 2 of them since we last connected a couple months ago, Living Life Backwards and Soul Keeping. So I definitely I think I have both of them on my Kindle, but I need to get the other 2, and any book Josh Beers recommends, I would encourage everyone to read.
Thanks. Thanks for the time with you, Garrett. This fills my bucket. I mean that sincerely. You are a man who helps people take next steps, and I just pray God's deep favor on what you're doing because I get better each time we connect. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, praise the Lord. Yeah, I love you. I'm just so grateful for you. And if people want to connect with you, best way to do that, Facebook, Instagram.
I'm on those Facebook more because I'm an old guy. I'm not putting a lot of things out there right now. The
Hmm.
best way, and I can drop that to you in the notes. I would give anybody my cell phone or my email and say, reach out to me. Um, I just want to live my life hands outstretched. Somebody had a question. Certainly, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram under my name, and
Okay.
I'd be happy in any way. And you could share any of my personal contact information. Whatever way we can bless people. This life is not my own. I wanna give it away.
Yeah, there's
So
that
that's my
generosity
vocation.
again.
So,
Yeah,
hey, it's not my own. I have that responsibility, and, and it really is a joy, and I find great joy in helping others discover. So if somebody has something they hear and say, "Hey, I'd like to bounce that off you," share my contact information, I'll respond. So,
great. Yeah, I will put your email in the show notes if people want to reach out to you there, but also I'll find your links for Facebook and Instagram too and drop them.
will do. Thanks.
But yeah, so grateful for our time together. I'm inspired by the way that you lead, the way that you love others. Even we didn't touch on this a whole lot, but just the way that you love and lead your family too has been inspiring for me. But I've just been so grateful to be on the receiving end of your leadership and just grateful for God allowing our paths to cross.
Thank you, Garrett. God is kind. We are blessed.
Yeah, 100%. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with some more valuable stuff on faith, purpose, and leadership. So God bless you guys, and we'll see you next time.